Hello everyone and welcome to this video. Now today I'm going to be doing another one of these album ranking videos looking at all of the albums from a particular year which I own, like ranking them all. So I'm going to be doing 1977 today. So in total I own 22 albums from 1977, not as many as some other years like that I've done, so this might be actually like a relatively quick like video. But yeah, like I am aware that there probably is quite a few albums, like sort of classic albums from this year that I don't actually own, so I would be interested to know what you think those are like in the comments. Like I've got a couple like of ideas of like ones like which are very iconic albums, like which I've just either like not got around to buying, or maybe just I haven't maybe got much interest in, or or for whatever reason I've just not yet bought. But if there's any other recommendations, I would be really interested to hear those. So I will just crack on with the list at number 22, my least favourite album from this year, and this was a bit of a semi-blind buy. It's a band, Clover. Now, the reason why I got this is because these guys are the backing band on Elvis Costello's debut album, which we will be seeing a little bit later on, in the video. So I thought, oh, Clover, okay, this album must sound just like Elvis Costello's first album. And in some ways it does. In some ways you can tell it's the same band, but it's just not got the same material, the same standard of material that Elvis Costello was bringing to the table. I mean, it's a relatively fun album, in places. Very kind of West Coast USA kind of sort of sound. Thinking of maybe say a slightly more danceable version, say of Paul Simon's work from this kind of era, like One Trick Pony, a little bit more I Got Beat, but also very forgettable though. It's safe to say that I've not purchased any other Clover albums beyond this, and to be honest, I don't think I really am all that interested. I know maybe a couple of years later they would kind of reinvent themselves as Huey Lewis and the News, but even then I've not really got all that much more interest in this beyond this, slightly impulse buy there. Okay, next up I think is going to maybe disappoint someone in particular, like James Griffiths. It is The Motors I'm going for at number 21. This is their self-titled debut album, or I think it's called The Motors 1, but this is a US copy of it here. And I mean, this album starts off brilliantly. Dancing the Night Away is a great song, and I particularly love this album version, which I think is an extended mix, or I think it's the 12-inch mix off the track, and the way it just builds up and gains energy as it goes on is just brilliant. But then all the rest of the material is in a very similar vibe to that sort of track, and I think there's some slightly slightly poor songwriting I think on here. I think tracks like Emergency and Phony Heaven I'm just not a fan of, and I think almost get a little bit annoying for me. It reminded me quite a bit of I did 1980 albums, and Tenement Steps by The Motors was also quite low on that list, so maybe I'm just not a big fan. But I've not done 78 yet when Approved by The Motors came out, which is arguably their best album, so that might be slightly higher on that list. But this one unfortunately comes in second last place at number 21. Okay, next up is a solo album by a member of The Who, Roger Daltrey here. Again, I'm not a big fan of Who's solo stuff. I think I remember buying this, when I was really just almost getting into record collecting, and they're the type of records you see really almost everywhere and really cheap, so I thought I would pick this up. But it's not a great record, this. It's one of these albums where it's written by essentially a kind of mishmash of different songwriters, so it's not very cohesive. There's a lot of jumping around on this album. There's even a song written by Paul McCartney. The track Giddy was kind of reworked from a track called Road All Night, which dates back to the Ram sessions. But I mean, good vocals. Roger does do a really great vocal on this album, and there's a lot of variety on it, but it's again very forgettable, quite undistinctive in places. Certainly not a patch on any Who album. So that's One of the Boys there by Roger Daltrey. Okay, next up, I'm sure people will say I have far too low on my list, but it's here anyway at number 19. It's Iggy Pop's album, The Idiot. So this was the first of 2 albums Iggy Pop released in 1977. It was also the first of 2 albums he worked extensively with David Bowie on. And this one, it was almost a kind of test bed for Bowie's Low album, you know, sort of exploring, slightly darker, more kind of ambient sort of sounds like in places, but also kind of but still kind of songs though. And there are some good songs on here. Like this has got it's got Sister Midnight, which Bowie would later work on. What did that song turn into? Red Money, I think, on the Lodger album. You've got Nightclubbing, which is an all-time classic, and then also the original version of China Girl is on here like as well, which is very different from the Bowie kind of 80s poppy remake of it. And I really like both versions of it. But beyond those, it's, I don't know, I just don't get on with this album. It's very dark, and you have to be very much in the mood for it. And then even then, particularly like the second side, I do struggle with this album, like I would say. And it's not supposed to be like easy listening like or anything, but yeah, I've maybe just like, it's not quite clicked with me yet, like I would say. So yeah, The Idiot, couple of good tracks, but yeah, all round slightly lackluster. Another slightly weird album here is the Beach Boys release from 1977, which is The Beach Boys Love You. Now this again is a strange one in their discography, because kind of 70s Beach Boys was kind of a mishmash of kind of all the kind of like, you maybe got say a couple of Brian Wilson songs and then a couple of songs written by like the other guys and like sort of Carl and Dennis Wilson all kind of chipping in with like their own songs. But this one is the first Brian Wilson led Beach Boys album since I think Pet Sounds, like if I can be like honest, or like kind of like, or like certainly like Smiley Smile, like so this one Brian was basically recorded a lot of it like alone with kind of synthesizers, and it's got a very messy kind of DIY feel to it, and it's very patchy, and there's some really good songs on here. Like I quite like the track Let Us Go On This Way. Has got a, I think that's the owner, very full-on kind of sound to it, you know, very primitive use of synthesizers. Solar System's a really nice ballad. The Night Was So Young is like a really nice, like again, like another nice ballad, like as well. But then there's some terrible tracks in here, things like Johnny Carson's kind of song about this kind of 70s chat show host, and Ding Dang is just a minute, and it's just absolute filler, like really. So yeah, slightly again quite a patchy album this one here, The Beach Boys Love You. Okay, next up is an album by the Kinks from 77, Sleepwalker here. So this was a bit of a comeback album for the Kinks, like in some ways, or rather the kind of them entering the kind of third sort of phase like off like their career. They kind of done all the kind of very extravagant kind of rock opera kind of albums, you know, big sort of grand concept albums, things like The Preservation, soap opera and all that. And this was a record where they basically just became like a good old-fashioned rock band again. So there's a lot of straight ahead tracks, you know, things like Life on the Road, Sleepwalkers are really good, like really good track, great groove to it. Brothers is, I think, a bit more like slower. There's some good tracks like on like the second side, like as well. Life Goes On's a nice closer. So yeah, like all round a good, consistent album. A little bit like undistinctive, but it's certainly a lot more, I guess, consistent than I guess maybe some of like the last couple like I've shown. So that's why I would give this one number 17. Okay, next up is the first of 2 albums on the list by the Jam, and I'm going for their second album. This is The Modern World, which is often considered the Jam's weakest album, and it kind of very much fits that kind of stereotypical sort of second album slump, like difficult second album kind of thing. I mean, this is a patchy record. There's no beating about the bush with that. There's a couple of really great songs on here though. Songs like Life from a Window and I Need You for Someone are great. It's kind of I guess kind of finding himself like as a songwriter, you know, kind of like sort of coming into his own as a kind of like sort of someone who's very influenced by the kind of great 60s songwriter. So I Need You sounds exactly like it could be like on like the Who Sell Out kind of thing, and kind of like Life from Window is very Ray Davies-esque. You've got things like Tonight at Noon has a more like acoustic textures on it. So again, they're kind of spreading their wings a little bit, but then there's some rubbish on here. Things like London Traffic, In the Street Today is okay. Don't Tell Them You're Saying's bad as well. The Combine's pretty bad. Here Comes the Weekend's alright. So again, it's very patchy, this album, you know. But again, there's a couple of decent cuts on here though, which I think make it worthwhile. And number 16. Okay, next up is a debut solo album by Peter Gabriel. Here is first of 4 self-titled albums he released. So this one, I think for me, is underpinned by 2 classic tracks. Salisbury Hill, the single, and the closing track, Here Comes the Flood, is just this gorgeous ballad. Slightly incohesive, like in the middle though. There's some slightly odd tracks on here, like Excuse Me, which is a kind of old sort of English vaudeville kind of style song, and then I think Waiting for the Big One has this kind of sort of jazzy kind of feel to it. So there's a lot of ground covered like on this album, but all round it is good. It's an interesting record though, and I think again that those 2 standout tracks are 2 of my favourite songs from this year. So yeah, Peter Gabriel debut would come in at number 15. Okay, at number 14 now, I've got another solo album by one of the members of The Who, or rather kind of sort of duet album kind of thing with Ronnie Lane from The Small Faces. This is Pete Townsend and Ronnie Lane with the album Rough Mix, and this is a really good record. This is a very warm album, this. Very charming record. Again, quite a lot of variety like on here, like in terms of like kind of music. Some more kind of bustly rockers, so things like My Baby Gives It Away, the opener, and Rough Mix. Like generally the Townsend tracks are more upbeat. The Ronnie Lane songs are a bit more kind of like acoustic and kind of more sort of country sort of like flavoured, but really good stuff though. And again, a nice record, and it's good that they kind of share, they sort of trade vocals like sort of like between songs. So you get a Townsend song, a Townsend song, like then like a Ronnie Lane song, and then there may be one where they sing together. So it doesn't get tiring, this album, like which I think it possibly might do, like if it was just one of them singing. But no, a really good record here, a really underrated album for me. Rough Mix would come in at number 14. Okay, next up at number 13, we have got 10cc's album, Deceptive Ben Says. So this record was quite an important album for 10cc. It was the first album they made without Godley and Creme, and it kind of proved that, at least for a time, like the remaining 2 members could make music which was arguably as good as the stuff they did, like they did like with like Godley and Creme, like Godley and Creme, like within like the band. So this album is very much split like into kind of 2 halves. Side 1 is the kind of pop hit, so you get like Good Morning Judge, The Things You Do for Love, Marriage Bureau, Rendezvous, always been one of my favourite. Modern Man Blues is again a bit poor lyrically, I think, but it's got a good kind of like fun, like kind of like chugging rhythm to it. And then kind of side 2 is the more like experimental stuff, so things like Honeymoon with B Troop, I Bought a Flat Guitar Tutor is basically like all like these kind of guitar chord puns. Quite a funny song, like if like you're like a musician. And then Feel the Benefit closes the album, which is the kind of 13-minute, very Beatles-esque kind of Abbey Road style kind of epic. So it's a good record, I think. One of my favourite 10cc albums actually, but ultimately they would struggle to replicate this like on like kind of follow-up albums, and it would be a very gradual decline like in like quality like for like the remaining 10cc albums. But this is a good decent album, comes in at number 13. Okay, that's not for me. At number 12 I've got the Jam's debut album here, In the City. So I do rate this higher than This Is the Modern World, which I think is like the general consensus. But maybe don't quite rate this as highly as maybe most people do. This is often considered a kind of classic debut album, and while this does have some really good tracks on it, things like Art School and In the City, the title track itself, Sounds from the Streets great, and I Got By in Time, I think is a really underrated track, probably my favourite like on here. I think there's also a fair bit of filler like on here. Things like the Batman theme, you don't need that. You've got to cover off Slow Down, which like the Beatles did. It's like a Larry Williams song. Yeah, you don't need that on here. Things like Time for Truth and Bricks and Mortar are again very early kind of examples of Weller trying to be political, but he's not quite got it down yet, I don't think. But there's definitely moments of greatness on here, and I think for those, it deserves its place at number 12. Okay, next up at number 11, I've got Billy Joel's album, The Stranger here. So this is, again, I don't quite want to call it like a guilty pleasure, because there's a lot of good tracks on here, and again, it's not one which I would necessarily play all the time either. Again, the track list of this reads almost like a greatest hits, Moving Out, Anthony's song, kicks off the album. You've then got the title track, The Stranger, Just the Way You Are, one of his classic ballads, Scenes from an Italian Restaurant, probably his greatest song, I'd say there, Only the Good Die Young's, is another great track, and She's Always a Woman, again, another classic Billy Joel ballad. So yeah, very much a kind of almost like a greatest hits sort of records here. So I think for kind of consistency and like that, I think this deserves its place at number 11. Yeah, just missing out on that top 10. Okay, next up for me at number 10 is Animals by Pink Floyd, which has always been one of my favourite Pink Floyd albums. This was quite a different record for them for the time that this was a lot more political, a lot more grounded, I guess, in reality, whereas I guess things like Dark Side and Wish You Were Here maybe dealt with slightly more abstract themes, whereas this album very much about kind of Animal Farm, kind of George Orwell kind of themes to it, and I think Roger Waters kind of took over the lyrical direction on this album, but I think does also really showcase the all four members kind of in terms of their musicianship they bring to the table. There's only 3 proper tracks on here, Dogs, Sheep and Pigs, but all 3 of them are really great. Particularly one of my favourite moments in Pink Floyd's music is the outro to Sheep, just a stunning piece of music that. So yeah, Animals for me will come in at number 10. Okay, next up at number 9, I have got ABBA's album, ABBA the Album from 1977. So this is quite a strange record for ABBA, again, in some ways. Released probably at the peak of their success. This album has 2 massive number 1 singles on it, Take a Chance on Me and The Name of the Game, but also probably has some of their most experimental and most kind of serious kind of songs. ABBA could be silly and kind of slightly frivolous sometimes, but this album does have probably more of their serious side on it. Things like the opening track Eagle almost could have been on that last Pink Floyd album, and then One Man One Woman is a very mature kind of ballad. Move On has this great kind of atmosphere to it. It just sounds very expansive, and it's just a gorgeous production. And then the kind of closing 3 tracks are all part of this kind of The Girl with the Golden Hair mini musical, which for me is not one of my favourite ABBA pieces. I think they go a bit too far down the musical theatre route for my liking. Definitely shows the way they would go on post ABBA, Benny and Beyond, on things like Chess, the musical, but it's maybe a bit over the top for me personally. But there's some brilliant tracks on this though, and I think it deserves its place at number 9. Okay, next up for me at number 8, I'm going for David Bowie's album Heroes. So this was the second album Bowie released in 1977, and this is arguably slightly more darker and colder than Low, which was his first album from this year. But I guess also musically, particularly the first side of this, I think sets the template he would follow sonically for his next 2 albums, both Scary Monsters and Lodger. Both of those albums have songs which sound very, very, very similar to the tracks on the first side of Heroes. Second side follows the kind of similar formula to Low, kind of ambient
instrumentals, but there's probably a bit more variety on here. So you get things like Sense of Doubt, which is this very bleak kind of you've got these very brooding piano notes going on there. Moss Gardens, this kind of ambient piece. New Clon has this blaring saxophone going on throughout it, and then it finishes with Secret Life of Arabia, this almost kind of quasi kind of disco track. So possibly a little bit less cohesive than Low. But I think every bit as creative, and you've also got the epic title track Heroes on there as well, so that definitely bumps
mess it up for me like a fair bit. So yeah, David Bowie's Heroes, yeah, comes in at number 8. Okay, next up for me at number 7, I'm going for this album by Television, which is Marquee Moon. This was a very innovative, very forward-thinking album for the time. Probably the first post-punk album before punk had even really begun and really kind of came to like an end, like I guess. Like, you know, this was quite progressive, like in like a lot of ways. Like the musicianship like on this album is just stunning. The kind of twin guitar work is just incredible. But then they kind of got really good tunes as well. Like, so those things like See No Evil has this great kind of like rolling riff to it. Friction has this great chorus, and then of course Marquee Moon is just, yeah, again, one of the songs like off like the year there. So yeah, all round really great album, really consistent. Unfortunately, like they've never quite hit the heights of this. I think they do one more album and then they possibly disbanded, I think. I'm far from an expert like on Television, but they certainly don't have like a big discography, but this is definitely their crowning achievement. Okay, next one up for me at number 6. You might be surprised at how high I have this one, despite the fact that I had his like other album from this year way down the bottom, like off like the list. But I've got Iggy Pop's Lust for Life here. This one is a record which just, yeah, was almost like the complete opposite, like off like the Idiot for me. I just really connected with this album and really enjoyed it almost from like the off. So you get the classic title track, you then get Some Weird Sin is absolutely one of my favourite like Iggy Pop songs, brilliant track. The Passenger is on here, which is again another one of his more famous songs, and then Tonight as well. Again, this is a record where David Bowie is all over. I think he co-wrote nearly every track like on here, and he's kind of playing on here, like you can hear it, you can hear like his backing vocals like on like Tonight as well. So it's all around just a really great record, and I think it maybe loses steam a little bit towards the end. I think track like Turn Blue I could maybe do without, but certainly the first side is pretty flawless, like I would say. So yeah, another great album here comes in at number 6. Okay, at number 5 for me, I've got ELO's Out of the Blue, another kind of firm favourite, like off like mine here. Probably the best ELO album, I would say. I kind of teeter between this one and A New World Record. New World Record's probably like is a bit more focused, just because it's a single album, but this one's definitely the more epic and probably has the better songs on it, like I would say, between kind of things like Turn to Stone, Sweet Talking Woman, Night in the City, Stepping Out. It's one of my favourite ELO ballads. You've then got like the Concerto for the Rainy Day, which is probably one of my favourite sides of music, just classic song like after classic song, and then a couple of good tracks towards the end as well, things like Birmingham Blues and like Wild West Hero. So all round a really good record. Maybe just a couple of fillery tracks I could probably do without. Starlight is just a bit boring. Believe Me Now I don't like, and Jungle again. So there's this kind of mid side to slump, where there's a couple of slightly fillery tracks, and The Whale as well is a slightly pointless like instrumental, but a great record though. And I think even though they're maybe not like the coolest band like in like the world, still a great record though, and will come in at number 5. Okay, that's not for me. At number 4, I've got the Talking Heads debut album, simply titled Talking Heads 77. This for me is probably one of my favourite Talking Heads albums. I think I'm probably in the minority there, just because it is so different. You know, kind of after this they would team up with like Brian Eno, and they'd go off and do like Remain in Light, Theatre Music, and they kind of explore like kind of very different kind of like sort of like kind of like sonic sounds, using kind of synthesizers and sort of different and like sort of slightly different sounds. This one is a lot more stripped back, a lot more primitive, this album, and it's got a kind of almost kind of scrappy feel to it, like in places. I just love again like the guitar playing like on here like is very clean and crisp, I think. You've then got you've got brilliant songs as well, things like No Compassion, The Book I Read, Pulled Up, The Closer is one of my favourites, not to mention Psycho Killer, which is a track like everyone will know like on here. So a great record here, like absolutely one of my favourite Talking Heads albums. Okay, next up at number 3, I have gone for Fleetwood Mac and the album Rumours here. So there is, yeah, absolutely no denying that this is a pretty damn consistent album, you know, like almost every song on here like is now considered like a stone cold classic, from like Dreams to Don't Stop, Go Your Own Way, The Chain, You Make Love and Fun. There's just a lot of brilliant tracks like on like this album, and I think what makes this special is the fact that it doesn't get boring. You know, you've got the 3 kind of songwriters and like the 3 vocalists who kind of obviously take it in turns to kind of like showcase out their talents basically. And I think like for kind of like mid-70s kind of pop rock, it doesn't really get much better than this. So I think Rumours would come in at number 3 for me. Okay, next up at number 2. Now this was my number 1 for a long time, but maybe just in the past month or two, my number 1 has kind of overtaken it and kind of like claimed at the top spot. But yeah, number 2 for me, I'm going for David Bowie and the Low album here. So this is probably my favourite Bowie album, or certainly is between this like and Station to Station, like I would say. And I just love the kind of 2 sides of this. So I think this was supposed to be called, I think, like Night and Day, like originally. But basically the first side is very short, snappy songs. You've got this kind of this great innovative drum sound, this kind of gated drum sound, which just sounds incredible, and I think doesn't date the album at all, and I think would be almost used as a kind of people like Steve Lillywhite would kind of develop that sound, like would become the drum sound like off like the 80s, but this was almost a kind of start like off it. So yeah, the first half you've got very short, snappy pop songs, I think, but again using very interesting textures, things like Always Crashing in the Same Car. You've got these different sounds, and then you can almost pick out different sounds every time you hear like the song, like something different basically, like kind of like grabs you like with like the track. And then kind of side 2 is these 4 very ambient instrumentals, which just have again gorgeous textures on them, and just really moving. Again, it's not the stuff I probably listen to like every day, but just when I do, it's always a really moving listen. So yeah, Low by David Bowie would come in at number 2. Okay, and now at number 1 for me, I've got My Aim Is True by Elvis Costello. So this definitely for me is up there with my favourite Elvis Costello albums. There's just, for me with this one like in particular, there's a sharpness and kind of like an immediacy to like the songwriting. Some super catchy tracks, very short songs, but really works really well. Things like Welcome to the Working Week just kicks off the album like with a bang. Miracle Man, I think, has again great musicianship, like from Clover, like as I said. It's quite interesting that their album's dead last, but the album that they play on here, like backing up like Elvis Costello, like happens to be like my first place, partly because of their excellent like musicianship. It really gives it like a unique feel compared to some of like Elvis Costello's later albums he'd do like with like Attractions. But again, it's just a really consistent record. And then you've got Alison, Watching the Detectives like on certain versions of the album. The Angels Want to Wear My Red Shoes, Lessons There are just so many brilliant tracks, and yeah, I think for me, yeah, deserves its place like at number 1. It's probably definitely the record out of all these I would say like I play the most, so I think yeah, probably yeah constitutes like as my favourite. Okay, so that has me come to the end of this video ranking all 22 albums there I own from 1977. So I think I know probably some of the obvious ones that I've not shown simply because I don't own. So I don't own the Sex Pistols, Nevermind the Bollocks. So it's a combination of like never seeing like a decent copy of it and probably not being too bothered about it like either. I know a lot of people like again who like a lot of the same stuff as me. You also really like really like Ian Jury, his album, I forget what it's called, but his big album was from 1977. I don't own that. Never really like bothered like with like that one. So but maybe one for me to get onto. And I'm sure there's tons of other albums, a lot more punky albums which I've like just like not got round to getting. So there's a big list, but those are the 22 ones which I do own from 1977. So yes, I hope you have enjoyed this video. I would be interested to know what some of your favourite albums are from 1977 in the comments below, and I will see you all next time for the next video. Goodbye.